Hi, I'm Brandy Hennett Crawford, an associate professor in EOLD and one who studies equity and inclusive pedagogy across the P16 pipeline. I'm going to chat with you about ways to ensure you are infusing the principles of diversity, equity, and inclusion throughout your courses. I know this is a college of education and the college is full of educators, but I would like to take a moment to give you some concrete strategies for looking at your own practice and taking it to the next level. I'm not going to belittle you or insult your intelligence in any way. I realize I'm talking to educational experts about teaching, but I am going to give you some food for thought. I want to think about teaching in terms of three components: content, context, and pedagogy. Content is what you teach. Context is the environment in which you teach. And a part of that has to do with who you teach, and that is your students. And pedagogy is how you teach. I'd like to begin by grounding the idea of DEI in teaching in the work of Bell Hooks, who writes extensively about engaged pedagogy and teaching as the practice of freedom. She said to educate as the practice of freedom is a way of teaching that anyone can learn. When education is the practice of freedom, students are not the only ones asked to share or to confess. Professors working to transform the curriculum so that it does not reflect biases or reinforce systems of dominance are most often the individuals willing to take risks that engaged pedagogy requires to make their teaching practice as a site of resistance. So it's asking that not only students be vulnerable in classrooms, but we do the same. Similarly, on the K-12 side, McGee, Banks, and Banks talk about this concept of equity pedagogy. And they describe that as teaching strategies in classroom environments that help students from diverse racial, ethnic, and cultural groups attain knowledge, skills, and attitudes needed to do two things: function effectively within and help create and perpetuate a more just, humane, and democratic society. We want our students to graduate as excellent educational professionals, yes, but don't we also want them to graduate with the criticality to stand in opposition to unjust systems that continue to perpetuate inequality? Are our courses giving them the tools to be change agents? Are we allowing them to explore inequality? And Paulo Freire said there's no such thing as neutral education. Education either functions as an instrument to bring about conformity or freedom. And often that depends on what and who we're reading. What our students read is often what we have read and what we have been taught. And we have to recognize that our academic pedigree often limits our knowledge of the field. Michael Apple reminds us in Official Knowledge that it is naive to think of the curriculum as neutral knowledge. Rather, what counts as legitimate knowledge is the result of complex power relations and struggles among identifiable class, race, gender, and religious groups. Our curriculum and our canon is the result of selected tradition, someone's selection and someone's tradition. Remember, qualitative research has recently gained wide-scale acceptance in the academy or in some disciplines. Other epistemologies and methodologies remain in the margins due to someone's selection. Similarly, we often mimic the pedagogical practice that was used when we were students. So to be equitable and inclusive in terms of teaching, think about inclusifying three things: the content, the context, and the pedagogy. So as you think about content, begin with yourself and you're like, what does who I am have to do with content? But you need to ask yourself some hard questions. What is your academic pedigree? Who taught you? And who taught them that taught you? What knowledge or truth may they have missed? What knowledge or truth may they have been unaware of? And what knowledge or truth did they consider illegitimate? Also, we have to audit what we're doing in our courses. Choose a class and audit the content. You need to establish your baseline. See if you can increase the diversity of who you're reading and whose work you're elevating. Also be vulnerable and audit yourself. Disaggregate the grades of the students in your courses. Who is doing well and who isn't? Then ask yourself, who aren't you serving well and why might that be the case? Ask your students for input beyond course evals on how you might restructure the class or assignments, especially to serve students who have not been doing well. Then when we think of the context and an inclusive environment and equitable outcomes, I really like to think about the work of Frank Tuitt. How can you leverage the experiences of the students in your class? Frank Tuitt writes extensively about inclusive pedagogy and explains that leveraging students' experiences helps to cultivate a just learning environment. You may not be an expert on the background of every student that you meet. No one is, but they are experts on themselves and they are qualified to share their own experiences. How do you make space for them in your class, their voice and their ideas, especially those who may be hesitant to readily share or participate because of one or more marginalized identity markers? And last but not least, we need to think about our pedagogy. How might you expand your repertoire of pedagogical practices? While learning styles as a theory has fallen out of favor, people's preferences range. Are all of your activities read and discuss or content followed by a quiz? What talents might students possess that your assignments and pedagogy have not allowed them to share? We want to make sure we create environments, learning environments, where our students have voice and choice. Here are a couple of references to kind of peruse through as you try to take your teaching to the next level. And I'm always happy to be a thought partner in this process.